Hi, and welcome to Introduction to Public Health Consulting. I'm Andrea Mantsios, the founder and the principal consultant of Public Health Innovation and Action. Phia is a public health consultancy committed to making meaningful impact through research and programs to improve the health of communities. This is part two of a two-part series. So if you haven't already seen part one, I recommend you go back and watch part one first and then come join us for part two. Part one is an intro to public health consulting, Public Health Consulting 101, and this is a deeper dive part two, the ins and outs of public health consulting. In this section, we will be talking about how to get started in public health consulting. We'll go into the nitty-gritty, as I call it, of kind of the details you need to know now and how to build structure to your work. We'll talk about pricing public health consulting services, finding balance in that work that you set up, and how you can chart an upward trajectory, what growth looks like in public health consulting. So to get started in public health consulting, I think there's two kind of big domains we want to think about. First, you need to get your ducks in a row, and then you need to build structure for your work. So first, talking through what it looks like to get your ducks in a row. Don't get mad at all the details I'm about to go into. Just embrace, there's a lot. I'm going to talk it through. This is the stuff I wish someone had told me. This is what I call the nitty-gritty. And I'm going to walk you through it, not because it's imminently important for you to know right now, but it's important for you to know that this is what is involved in becoming a public health consultant. The finances of becoming a public health consultant are iffy at best in the beginning. So you don't know what's coming in the door. It's a rule of thumb that you should absolutely follow to maintain at least 6 months of living expenses as a financial cushion when you start to pursue public health consulting, because you just don't know when you'll land contracts, how much they'll be for, what money you'll be bringing in. So as a rule of thumb, it's really important to have a financial cushion as you embark on public health consulting. There's overhead to consulting. What is the cost of running your consulting business? Being an independent consultant, you have to cover several expenses. Get out your calculator, make a list, or use your spreadsheet and program a formula into your cells and just go through how much it costs to operate. You have internet, you have electricity, you have the software programs you use, you have supplies. All of that is now part of your work that you pay for in overhead. So that needs to be itemized. There's also the wonderful world of taxes that you have to manage as a public health consultant that I'm just going to flag for you because it's important to know generally that public health consulting is obviously no longer working for an employer where you're issued a W-2 form. You're now an independent contractor who's issued a 1099 form by each client you work for. And what that means is also there's not an employer who's regularly taking taxes out of your paycheck. You as an independent consultant are responsible for paying estimated quarterly taxes. And that's based on your forecasting of how much you think you'll make for the year and paying quarterly an estimate of what you think the taxes are for the income you think you're making. You can be wildly off sometimes, like I have been, or you can be pretty close, like I have been, and it gets figured out every year at tax time. And you also need to be tracking deductible expenses as an independent consultant that you'll be reporting with your taxes every year. So those are the first three nitty-gritty things I wanted to highlight for you. And here's the three other things I wish someone had told me about. This is a little obvious. There are absolutely no employer benefits in public health independent consulting. This is the reality. The days are gone. A lovely benefits package from your employer. So you actually need to figure out very concretely how you're going to make sure that you have health, dental, and vision coverage. And that might mean being on a spouse's plan. That might mean paying for your own coverage. So that needs to be figured out before you take the leap. And similarly, there's no kind of contributions to retirement savings going on in the background from a savings plan your employer has as an option that they're matching contributions for and all that lovely stuff. Not happening anymore. You're on your own and you have to find things like a SEP IRA or whatever your mechanism is going to be for contributing to retirement savings. So that's one of the realities of being independent. You also need to get insurance in place. There's general liability insurance as well as professional liability insurance, which is sometimes called errors and omissions. These are not tremendously expensive, but they are things that you need to incur a cost on and make sure you have in place. And the final thing which someone had told me about was just the idea of getting a legal set of eyes to look at things. And I did this early on, and I was so glad the minute I did. It's things like, what do I need to include in the fine print of my contracts? I certainly didn't have the legal background to know that, but someone should give you that guidance. And it doesn't mean a fancy pants lawyer who you have to pay for. There's plenty of free legal advice. I got support through my local small business association. And these all together make up kind of what I'm calling the nitty-gritty of public health consulting. It's an ugly way to start, so I hope it didn't deter you too much, but I'm here to tell you that in the end, I was loving it anyway. I got through all of that. And it felt a little bit like jumping out of an airplane without a parachute, but I'm still smiling. I was having a great time doing it anyway. It's, the whole process of getting your ducks in a row feels good because you're in control and you are crossing your T's, dotting your I's, and making sure you've got a strong start to being a public health consultant. And then the next step is really building structure to your work, because again, you're flying solo. You've got to create systems that would normally be in place if you had an employer. You are going to chart all of this out to be exactly how you want it to look. And that to me is very exciting. Creating systems and establishing infrastructure of the way I wanted to operate was a really exciting process for me. It's up to you and your little brain to come up with how you're going to track your business expenses, develop your invoicing system, and put together your proposals and contracts. I had spent so many years working for other institutions and within systems that I didn't think were necessarily as effective or efficient as they could be. I had thought about, what did work about certain systems, what didn't work, what I would do differently. And when you become an independent consultant, you really can put together the system the very way you want to, which is exciting and requires a lot of work, but it's done the way you want it to do. So this is including everything from how you're going to track your time to how you're going to invoice your clients, manage your bookkeeping and track your expenses, how you will be delivering contracts to your clients, and the operational protocols you need to put in place. So all of this is on you to develop, which is a lot of work, but also really exciting and cool. The next thing I want to talk about is public health consulting services are a very, special place to be in the world of pricing. You have no idea going into this, or I had no idea going into this, how to figure out pricing. I didn't think I had anyone kind of give me the orientation I needed to be able to price public health services. I had worked on plenty of budgets before, but nothing really prepared me for how to do this. So I wanted to spend a couple slides on exactly that. How do you price public health consulting services? First, you want to be thinking about industry standard. I think it's important to talk to others in the field and know kind of what are the going rates out there. And that includes talking to public health consultants about what they're charging and what pricing looks like from their perspective. And also if you have folks who, hire consultants, ask them kind of what industry standard is. So that's a good exercise to conduct to get a sense of what going rates are. And then also your pricing depends on the experience and education you're bringing. And then of course, those business expenses you have to cover needs to be taken into account as you think about your pricing. So there's basically three models I wanted to highlight for how you price public health consulting services. Fixed pricing is when there's kind of a flat fee associated with like a very clearly defined scope of work. Maybe it's a product or a set of deliverables, like it's an assessment tool or a series of workshops, and it's pretty well defined. And there's a flat fee for delivering those deliverables or that product that you have outlined with the client. That can be either value-based or kind of time and effort-based, but it's a flat fee associated with conducting the work. Then there's retainer pricing, which is where it's an ongoing payment that you have on a monthly basis, and it kind of takes two forms. You could have kind of a max number of hours you're going to work for that client every month, and they're paying you for those hours. Or there's kind of a subscription model, I like to call it. It's like a subscription to your brain. Basically, they have access to you on a monthly basis for you to work on their projects for X amount of money. And so that's an ongoing payment, which is lovely to have. Retainer fee clients are wonderful. And then hourly pricing is the final model I wanted to touch on, which is, as you can tell, being paid for a unit of time of your work. And, there's drawbacks and benefits to each of these. I think, a lot of people want to move away from hourly pricing. And there's in fact a whole podcast called Ditching Hourly, and you can listen to all the reasons why it's really beneficial for consultants to not use hourly pricing. But the truth is you'll probably use a combination of these. So I use different pricing models for different clients, depending on the work at hand, the project and the client. So it's just good to be oriented to the fact that there are different ways to price your services, and you have to find the appropriate fitting model for the work that you're doing. People are often confused about how you even determine your rate, like where do you even start? And this is taken from Barrington Research Group. I have the link at the bottom. This is like kind of the 4 things you need to know to determine your daily rate, just as an orientation how you would even begin to conceptualize this. So you need to be thinking about billable time. You want to know the total amount of time in a year that you have to work for clients. You have to think about your overhead, as I've already mentioned. What's the cost of running your business for the year? your salary, the amount of money you want to make in a year, and your profit. A good profit margin to start with would be like 10 to 15%. So this calculation is pretty straightforward and easy. Your daily rate would be your salary plus your overhead divided by billable days plus profit. And this is just one example of how you can start to navigate how you would figure out your pricing. This is a rate with a calculation you can easily do. But there's plenty more out there to take a look at. I wanted to direct you to some helpful resources that can help you navigate the world of figuring out public health consulting prices. So this first one is a link to public health consulting, how much should I charge? An excellent blog post that does a great job of breaking down how you figure this out. Deciding a pricing model for your consulting services is a podcast on the Craft of Consulting site, which I mentioned in part 1, is an excellent resource for navigating being an independent consultant. Your daily rate is from the previous slide. That's if you want to read more about how to do that calculation and what goes into that. There's also wonderful other resources at that site. And pricing for a profitable consulting business is another podcast on the Craft of Consulting website. So there are many resources out there to help you as you figure this out. And this is something that is trickier in the beginning and becomes clearer with time for sure, as you have a sense of your pricing models and how you price your own work. Really important is to figure out how to find balance in doing this work. Because it is so unstructured, you want to avoid this dreaded cycle of feast or famine, where you have like a ton of projects on your plate and then nothing, and you can barely keep up, and then you're like twiddling your thumbs. It really is a balancing act to try to keep the pipeline full of work, but not get stretched so thin that you can't do your work well. And finally, also just finding balance in your work and life and the way you want it look, because if you're choosing this path, it's likely because you want to maintain some sort of work-life balance, and whatever that may look like for you, you want to make sure you're hitting that nail on the head and saying, I am doing this for the reason I chose, and I have like a breakdown in my life that feels good of work to balance out with life, my family, my friends, my things that make me happy. So that's briefly why I think, we are all struggling in the consulting world to make sure we have balance on all those fronts, but it's an ongoing challenge, and it feels great when you hit the right mark. Then what does growth look like? So what does an upward trajectory for public health consultants look like? I have it kind of broken down into 3 domains. First, there's professional development. And so you want to always be trying to take webinars or workshops or get additional certificates or attend trainings that can help you advance your professional development and achieve more and broaden your knowledge base, your networks, all of that. There's also business development that leads to upward trajectory, and that means grooming client relationships for future work, pursuing new business so that you have new clients and potentially in broader areas, increasing the scope of what you do. That may or may not appeal. You may want to niche down, or you may want to broaden in terms of the kinds of services you can offer within your niche. And fostering collaborations is a great way to continue in the upward trajectory in business development. And then finally, brand development. So whether that's through social media or other types of marketing, really promoting your niche so that you become the go-to person on that specific area. And then just finally, I wanted to say, the most important thing is you got to get excited for the ride ahead, because it's a wonderful but totally undetermined path. It's uncharted territory, as I've mentioned, and you are creating the path. It's not going to be straightforward, as that first image shows. There's going to be peaks and valleys. There will be dips, and I think it's important to take those as opportunities to learn, reflect on them, and learn from them. Pivot if you need to, laugh, have a good time. If things are out of your control and go a different way, you just got to reassess where you're going next and enjoy the ride. You're creating this path. It's a bit of a choose your own adventure. So I think, it's not going to be a straightforward path, but enjoy it along the way as you make your public health consulting path look the way you want it to be. That is my ins and outs of public health consulting, doing a deeper dive into what it looks like to be a public health consultant. Thanks for joining both part 1 and part 2. I hope you've watched both, and you're free to contact me with any questions. I've left my email here at the bottom, and happy to hear from you. Thanks.